Hey trainers, welcome back to the 2019 Pokemon Trading Card Game Regional Championship here in Hartford, Connecticut, sponsored by Full Grip Games. Remember, enter in LGN10 for 10% off of singles you order this weekend. I'm John Kettler, CalChexis on Twitter, and to my right is Mr. Kirk Doobsnacks Dubé, and we got an exciting matchup for y'all.
Yeah, I'm going to lean, can't confirm yet, they don't have it on, but let's just say it's what the chat's been clamoring about for quite a bit.
Yeah.
We got a decent matchup here. Excited to bring it to you. And Chris, kind of bringing the normal expanded boogeyman that we've been discussing a little bit today.
Yep, so it's going to be Zoroark and Durant, and I think it's going to be a good test for the Durant deck. It's been around for several years. It's arguably one of the oldest decks in all of Expanded since it's been legal, since I'd like to say, when Noble Victories first came out, that was all the way back in 2011.
It has fallen in and out of favor as the mill deck of choice in Expanded, but really putting together a good showing here today at 4-0-1. And tell us a little bit, for those that might not be familiar, have been only in the game for a couple years, what is the strategy that Durant is trying to employ here?
Right. Well, there are three primary ways, as you all remember from your rule books of the game, know when it comes to being able to win. There are three ways you can win a game. One is you bench your opponent out. They have no Pokemon left in play. Another way is drawing all 6 prize cards. And then there's the third method of being able to win, milling your opponent out of all of their cards to the point where when their turn starts, they have no deck left to draw from, and so they lose that way. Well, there are a whole bunch of different decks that allow you to get to that point, and usually it's the least likely way that players are going to be able to win a game. Well, there's some decks that are actively targeted towards doing that, like Durant, where for the number of Durant that you have in play, you can discard the top cards of your opponent's deck. And interestingly enough, Alfredo right here running the Durant deck, he runs only 3 copies of that Noble Victories Durant, which is the whole focus of his deck. However, let's not forget, it's not like he's running less than 4 Durant total. He has a single copy of this Durant from Flashfire, an even older set, even older card than the Noble Victories Durant, letting him chip away literally at his opponent's hand until it only has 4 cards left. So Zoroark gets a big hand. He's going to be like, nope, let's go ahead and trim that down a bit.
Yeah, it seems like our players are ready, so we are going to send you right down to the action. You'll see Alfredo playing Durant will be on the left-hand side of your screen. Chris Venier will be on the right-hand side of your screen. He's playing Zoroark Garbodor, as I mentioned before, so might get a lot of mileage out of that Durant from Flashfire with that chip-off ability, because as we know, those Zoroark decks like to draw a bunch of cards.
Hey, Kirk, do we have any spice on that Zoroark list, or is looking pretty typical for your run-of-the-mill Zoroark?
Well, we've got Garbodor, we've got Klefki, with the Wonderlock ability to kind of only lock your opponent out of abilities, which might be relevant with the Mew FCO that Alfredo plays. Going down the list, bodybuilding dumbbells in most matchups would be interesting. In this one, it's not really about damage output, so might not get any mileage out of that.
Yep. So while it might be a dead card in this matchup, it can be crucial in others. I mean, and that happens sometimes with a single copy inclusion. So another blast from the past on the bench for Alfredo's deck. That Jirachi promo, number 67, all the way back from X and Y. With its Stardust attack, it lets you discard a special energy attached to your opponent's Pokemon, and in exchange, if that was the case, if there was a special energy discarded, then you prevent all effects of attacks, including damage done to Jirachi. And we have even more synergy with that Mew Fates Collide being able to copy not only the core focus of the deck, Durant, but being able to copy that Stardust attack.
That's a very solid point, John. But for now, before we can see what strategy Alfredo employs, Chris is going to go with a Battle Compressor, get some key cards out of his deck. Maybe the Propagation Egg execute. Maybe a supporter if he has a Versus Seeker in hand. Kind of unlocks that, a neat little combo there. And Chris, looks like I see a Bridget pulled to the front, maybe having that Versus Seeker in hand and Propagation Egg along with Colress.
Yeah, and that's one of the cool things about Expanded is it gives you so many outs to consistency, and some are a little more surprising than others, where this combo right here of Battle Compressor and VS Seeker effectively guarantees you the use of any supporter card in your deck on the first turn. So even if you don't have an Ultra Ball to get that Tapu Lele, get that Wonder Tag, search for any supporter in your deck and put it in your hand, you have an indirect way around it too. So 2 different ways to do the same thing.
Chris electing to choose Zorua Trubbish. Again, has the Garbotoxin Garbodor, has the Trash Avalanche Garbodor, as well as the Klefki to kind of move around to get those abilities locked out. And of course, Chris Chris isn't playing Resource Management Oranguru, which is a card that would be pretty useful in a matchup like this, where Durant is really stressing Chris's resources.
Yeah, but I think that Chris's choices of the Trubbish are a roundabout way to do the same thing. While I do really like having Oranguru in the deck regardless of what type of a Trubbish you're running, Garbage Collection at least gives you that option, even if it's far less effective at doing the same thing that Oranguru does.
Alfredo leads with a Team Rocket's Handiwork, 2 Tails, unfortunately. Of course, that card discards the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck for each heads. 2 Tails will mean no cards are going to the bin just yet. Alfredo sighs and, of course, plays a level ball. Might be time to start getting some Durants down into play.
Yeah, and that's the domino effect you can have of not getting Durants into play fast enough, where if you only have maybe like 1 or 2 Durants in play and you start devouring, then you begin to lose resources over a really weak mill. And because your Durants start getting knocked out, that really doesn't work out too well. So it seems like Alfredo might be taking a completely opposite approach to this game right now, where he has his utility Pokemon out in play. Maybe he's going to be eyeing some of these special attacks. Stardust later, maybe even eyeing Get Lost as a way to get some stuff back, or getting some stuff out of play, so that Chris won't have it, like that Propagation Execute.
Alfredo, again, maybe understanding the matchup to a little bit deeper level than we do here, gets a Girafarig, puts it down. Mew FCO, of course, able to copy that attack, gets lost, a Propagation Egg, and a Colress. So if Chris doesn't have another supporter in hand, Alfredo doing a good job cutting him off from the rest of his deck, and this is going to be a setup for 2. Bodybuilding Dumbbells, a dead card in this matchup, and a Floatstone, not too bad.
Yeah, I mean, he has a couple options here. If for some weird reason he doesn't have an out to Zoroark, he can bring back that Shaman EX with the double colorless energy, Sky Return it to his hand, as he's doing right now, get that 30 damage on the Mew, and keep that Shaman from being a target later.
That the thing with the Mew FCO and its 50 HP is it can be taken down pretty efficiently by Sky Returns. And Chris really using what he's got to do his best to keep himself in this game. Durant comes down on Alfredo's side of the board. And we see a Versus Seeker in hand and shielding the other 2 cards quite well. I believe that is the Devour Durant that has now hit the bench. And that's an attack that Mew FCO can copy as well.
But it's not going to be able to copy it to maximum effect because of the size of his bench. He has 3 non-Durant Pokemon total in play, that Mew, the Jirachi, and the Girafarig. But I think that he's counting on not having all those Pokemon in play, obviously, for the rest of the game. One of them is going to get knocked out at some point. And another aspect of what we have here is that Alfredo might even have a weird prizing situation right now, where he might have, say, a 4th Durant and a Gladion prized, or he might have 2 Durant prized. At any rate, his board is set up in a way where he doesn't really need to feel like he's going to do anything less than a fully optimal Devour.
Alfredo's turn, compromise of Versus Seeker for Handiwork. Unfortunately, another set of 2 Tails, and Alfredo elects to take the shot in the dark, uses Devour for 1 card, and hits a Zoroark GX.
Yeah, and you know what? If you're only going to Devour for 1 card, that's definitely the card you want to get rid of, although he's fallen a little bit behind, and of course, I mean, I really love this play that Christopher's playing right now. He's going to loop this for a little while until he feels like he has to get a knockout. I mean, it's not that big of a problem, but Alfredo can now fill his entire board up with more Durants, assuming he even has access to the full suite of Durants.
Chris, having played just down the Shaman, that was a setup for 1. Attach DCE, take a knockout.
And he's passing. Oh, that's rough.
Lysander up on the Garbotoxin Garbodor, but that doesn't have the Floatstone yet. Chris benching Tapu Lele because abilities are still live, and we'll be able to get a supporter here of some sort to loosen up the grip of this hand.
Yeah, and you know, I got to compliment Alfredo on a really good defensive play that turn, because make no mistake about it, his hand is not good right now. So you might as well do something along the lines of a Lysander play, and you can make defensive gust up plays like that, where you can switch out one of your opponent's Pokemon in order to just leave it there for a while. And for Durant, a lot of your plays like that are going to be defensive. You aren't looking to knock anything out, obviously.
Ultra Ball grabs Zoroark GX. Christopher using Guzma to pull up Stardust Jirachi. Zoroark going to jump into the active, pick up a DCE, and get rid of that threat to his special energy.
Interesting decision here to VS Seeker the Guzma directly into Christopher's hand, and I think that's almost entirely because of the Get Lost Girafarig. Going down the list here really quick for Christopher, we have just that one copy of Guzma, so that's obviously a defensive play to avoid it from getting sent to the Lost Zone.
Rescue Stretcher pulls Stardust Jirachi back. Alfredo did draw the Metal Energy right off the top. However, how do you unlock this situation? You either got to commit the Metal Energy to the Durant or the Stardust Jirachi. He benches it immediately, which is off a little bit to me because we do know Chris just picked up that Guzma. We're going to Devour for one. The Ace Spec goes away, the Dowsing Machine, I believe. Another Zoroark GX comes down, and Chris is moving at a little bit better clip than Alfredo is.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely in the commanding spot here. Oh, and he
Juniper.
gets the top deck of the Juniper.
Juniper off the top. Let's just hope it's not too late for Alfredo to rally back here.
I don't think that it is. I mean, all he needs is a single energy. Bump this double colorless energy. Try to get something set up. But that's assuming he gets a metal energy of his own, which it looks like he didn't. He has a bunch of items and Pokemon, but I think he's just going to get knocked out this turn.
Field Blower going to take care of the Floatstone and the Bodybuilding Dumbbells. 6 cards left in hand. A couple Team Flare Grunts. Level Ball. Good place to start. Get something on the bench.
Oh, wait. Okay, well, never mind. It's in his deck. I was getting a little too ahead of myself there, but I saw that copy of Mount Coronet, getting a little hopeful, thinking that Alfredo would be able to get back his energy, but actually, I think he might have a little bit of hope with that one Trainer's Mail in his hand, because if he hits the Mount Coronet off of the Trainer's Mail, that can be good. He could also hit some sort of energy denial to get that double colorless energy off the board, but I would love to be able to get a Stardust off here.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, Enhanced Hammer can come in and do some work here. Mount Coronet can buy back the metal energy. Alfredo does have some outs here and some ways to stay in, and of course that energy denial is chock full up in his hand. Juniper, Trainer's Mail, Crushing Hammer, might have to pin it on the Crushing Hammer here.
The question is he's eyeing his hand, thinking about if he can handle not having, and it looks like he didn't have any draw power in his hand, so yep, he's playing it safe, playing it conservatively, going for that Professor Juniper so he at least has something to continue his game for next turn.
Here's my concern here with choosing the Juniper, John, is yes, it gives you draw support for the next turn. However, you are actively not stopping Chris from doing anything this turn. And the concern I have with that is
he's so far behind.
If he's so far behind, it doesn't matter if he has draw support for next turn if he can't leverage it. Versus Seeker off the top for Chris, just a pass. Obviously, the energy did not come down. We're going to see trade number 1, and that's a Garbantoxin Garbodor going away. Choice Band and a Shaman EX picked up by Chris. His grip is pretty full, so I don't think we're going to see the Shaman come down for any setup value. Another trade, that's a red card. If I'm Chris, I am definitely sensing weakness here, and I'm not sure I red card. I make Alfredo make a choice between Juniper and the rest of his hand.
Yeah, and I think that was a pretty wise decision not to do something cute with that red card in his hand. Instead, it looks like it just got dumped and discarded here so Christopher can get more of his setup going, not even worrying about any of that business, go into his typical game plan and definitely getting a knockout on this Jirachi next turn, putting even more pressure on Alfredo and maybe even making him consider an early concession because we're 11 minutes into this game.
Ultra Ball from Chris. Another Zorua definitely wants to maximize the draw power that his deck has. Garbotoxin not even really relevant and would only shut down Chris's side of the board of any value here. Obviously, Mew FCO gets shut down, but Chris is so far ahead, I don't think that's a concern.
One turn too late with that Enhanced Hammer, but at least he has a little bit of energy hate.
Yeah, so that Enhanced Hammer is going to hit that DCE, going to go to the discard. Now Alfredo seeing if he wants to put any of his other cards to the bench before they all hit the bin off Sycamore. That is 2 Flare Grunts and a Bunnelby. 6 cards, and
is that no energy again?
Life Dew is a start, maybe. Trainer's Mail into that Mount Coronet is what you want to see here. Juniper, Crushing Hammer, Nest Ball, and another Durant.
Well, I mean, he can at least set himself up a little bit more, but I think that Christopher's set himself up pretty well this game, and that's an understatement. I don't see any special charge in his list, other than Trubbish. I'm not really seeing too much recovery, so that might be an option, an avenue for Alfredo. But remember, guys, this is a Zora Garbordo list, so we have Trashalanche as an actual attacking option as well, meaning that, you know what, even if all the doubles are gone, we could just Trashalanche for game.
Knowing how mill decks work, as I've mentioned before, I spent pretty much all of my season qualifying with Waylord, and understanding how the length of time it takes to win a series with Waylord. If I'm Alfredo, I'm seriously considering packing it in. 37 minutes seems like a long time for 2 games, but the way a Zoroark deck plays with all the action it has, and the way a Durant deck plays with all the mill options and denial options it has, they're not that fast. And it's very hard for the Durant deck to take that quick win that some other decks have the opportunity there.
Yeah, and the great thing about Durant is that it moves much quicker than your typical mill deck, like a Waylord deck that just draws, plays a supporter, and passes. Whereas with Durant, you're actively discarding multiple cards with your attacks, so it can be a little quicker. But yeah, I agree with the theme of what you're saying.
Rescue Stretcher going to buy back a couple Durants, Mew FCO, Stardust Jirachi, Mew FCO, and a Durant going back in, and just the Life Dew on the Mew and a pass. 2 very quick trades from Chris. Going to take a look at the discard, surveying for some piece of information. Field Blower on the Life Dew, of course. Trashalanche Garbodor, DCE to the Zoroark.
Yeah, and right now Christopher's just sitting on game. I mean, unless he gets End or something, and I only see a couple copies in Alfredo's list, then there's no way that Christopher doesn't win.
Yep, there's valuable minutes. Finally a heads, and it's unfortunately one of the only ones that didn't necessarily matter for this game, because we know Chris does have access to some other energies in hand, but an N going to come down, and hope that Chris didn't thin his deck quite enough, and that Alfredo will get a couple terms of reprieve here.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be all the difference right here, is that Christopher, he only runs that single copy of Guzma, right? So he needs to hit just the right card combination to pull it off, but he doesn't want to do it at the expense of his whole deck. Remember, guys, his deck is getting slowly but surely a little bit thinner, so if Alfredo can open himself up for some hope against odds here to be able to just start discarding things and maybe hit one of those valuable resources, he could be golden.
There's the Mount Coronet and a Net Ball versus Seeker and Crushing Hammer, so that's a hand he would have liked to see a little bit earlier in this game. However, a great Devour opportunity here, and 3 Durants in play. If Alfredo hits, a couple DCEs and like a Guzma or something like that, really minimize the outs that Chris can play to, maybe he can make this this comeback when Chris has only got 1 prize remaining. Trick Shovel going to start off. Sycamore can go. Sycamore can go. Mount Coronet. Let me buy back some medals here.
Yeah, and we can get some of those discards going, and if Alfredo is really lucky, he might be able to hit the right exact combination of discards. Now, although that's the thing, is that Christopher is running just enough energy. I don't think I've seen a single Psychic hit the discard yet. Oh, and there's a double.
Rescue Stretcher.
Oh, and a Psychic.
And a Psychic energy. Okay. Chris draws for turn. Trades the Acerolas. He's got another trade available. A Guzma. I did see a Guzma, but 2 energies gone. No energies in hand. Has another trade, though.
That's right.
Has another trade available. Dump Skyfield, and Egg.
Yeah, it looks like it.
He missed it, but the Guzma is safe in hand.
Yeah,
so
it is.
Alfredo, to kind of feel what Chris has got going on, might go N and Devour, and has another opportunity to hit He hit that Guzma.
This VS Seeker has to be going for a supporter draw card. Yeah, and it's going to be the Sycamore. So looks like he's just going to dig hard and hopes he gets it. He has to be running low on energy, but
just goes for it.
He just, and there's a super
There's
rod.
a DCE right there.
There it is. Okay, yeah. Man, I really like that attempt by Alfredo at the end, getting those discards going, and that was a pretty good start. It's just like not enough and not at the right time,
Yeah, I really think Alfredo didn't get out of the starting blocks as he would have liked there. Obviously, a couple very, very slow turns in the start, and Chris had already taken 3 knockouts. I think you reach a threshold for Alfredo. You're either committed to whatever the result of that game is or scooping, and once you pass that threshold, you have to just go for it like he did. And I think maybe he realized that. He goes, I don't actually gain a lot from scooping here because I've lost so much time on the clock. Unfortunately, Chris able to piece together out of 3 cards kind of what he needed to get to that last DCE to take his final prize.
Yeah, although I definitely loved the try there. Now, granted, the Super Rod was there in that 7-card hand from the Professor Sycamore, but if things went just a little bit differently and Alfredo got another really good discard off of Christopher with Devour, then maybe we would have had a different result. And you know what? I think it really helps that the recovery speed at which Christopher's Trubbish move is just not that competitive with the rate at which Durant discards. So I just don't even see that factoring in that much. You can't really spend a turn using that attack the way you could with Oranguru.
Right, if I'm not mistaken, Garbage Collect also puts the card on top, does it
Yep.
not? So, I mean, with Alfredo's tools such as Trick Shovel, Devour, able to use Mew to copy Devour and things like that, obviously not going to get the right amount of mileage out of that Garbage Collection. And can't forget Team Rocket's handiwork that also has the potential to mill cards off the top. So, Alfredo, just above 31 minutes left here, needs 2 quick ones. Because this matchup is certainly one in his favor, and the only thing that can really beat him now is the amount of time on the clock.
Yeah, absolutely. Unless, of course, Christopher could win the second game. That's the other thing that could beat him.
Well, sure. I mean, we're speaking exclusively to the matchup, which is more favored in Alfredo's direction to feast on these types of decks. It really didn't come together in game 1. I think that he was on the weaker side of variance. So.
I definitely think we can see something different in the second game because Christopher's resources are finite, and even more finite than a typical Zoroark deck.
Players are ready to go. Let's get back into it. Alfredo.
Bunnelby, not the best starter in the world for Alfredo, but okay. I mean, it gives you options. It gets you a little bit of recovery if you lose something crucial at the beginning, but also takes a little bit of pressure off of you and your Durants.
I hope for Alfredo's sake he didn't just pass. Doesn't seem like he did. I think he put Christopher on the play.
Yeah.
To be able to maybe Devour Rototiller, do something like that of value, maybe get lost like he did last turn. Always worth things considering. Chris, Shaman up front, not that big of a concern. We'll be able to use Sky Return to not only preserve an energy on board, but also get it out of the active. So, Chris, not too sad to see that Pokemon up front.
For sure. And that damage division right there is perfect. I mean, you've got 2 hits of 30. It's going to be the same clean hit the way that you had against Mew Fates Collide last game.
That Tapu Lele naturally out of hand grabbed the Bridget, Zorua, Trubbish. That's just the standard order. Mew FCO off the top hits the bench. That is 3 Metal Energies, now 2 in hand.
And subsequently a very painful discard if that's the direction we're going down. We lose that Enhanced Hammer. Not really that big of a problem since he still has plenty of energy to Nile.
Mount Coronet out of that. Juniper going to help recover that a little bit. And a couple ways to get some Durants or Mews or Giraffarigs in play. Whatever Alfredo's heart desires.
Yeah, and you know what? It does help that even though he might have lost 1 or 2 valuable resources with that Bunnelby, remember, with its ancient trait, it lets Bunnelby attack twice in a turn. So Alfredo could take this one of 3 directions. He could replenish some resources for both his attacks. He could discard for 2 attacks, or he could do 1 and 1. And if between what he discarded in this off of the Juniper and everything that Christopher has There might even be an argument for being able to do one of each.
Yeah, I tend to do one of each, just whether it's a supporter or what have you, especially because you have Mount Coronet. I don't think I would play it down right now because it is his only stadium. But make sure that when he uses it, he's buying back 2 energies for max value into his hand. Couple shuffles here. We saw the level ball grab a Durant, and we saw the nest ball grab the Durant with the chip off attack going into a trainer's mail. Let's look at the top 4, grab a trainer.
Oh, and there's a trick shovel in there, and that lets Alfredo discard even more resources from Christopher. We're probably going to see that right away right now.
Trick shovel, as you mentioned, is selected. Alfredo giving his cards a good shuffle up there. Pull it to the grip. And trick shovel. Look at the top. Bennett.
Oh, boom.
That's a DCE. You can send that one packing.
Absolute best thing that he could have hit there. And if Alfredo can hit another energy on this attack, assuming that he even does use it, and he is eyeing returning one of his resources here by using Bumblebee, but instead he uses 1 discard, just a Zorark, and he gets back the trick shovel.
A Zorark and a DCE, 2 very good cards to send to the discard for Alfredo. Chris drawing a Psychic Energy off the top, and Alfredo putting that trick shuffle back in his deck.
Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to getting that trick shovel back as opposed to just discarding 1 more card. The advantage, of course, being is that now you have the option to leave something bad on top of your opponent's deck and a little bit more control. The disadvantage is that you have a slightly larger deck now and slightly more cluttered, so that might give you slightly worse odds in turn of being able to get exactly what you need. So it's a tough call. I could see it going either way, but definitely a good card to have in the right spot.
Chris using an early N here, going to put both players to 6 cards in hand. That, of course, not happening before Zorua evolves into Zorark GX, the ever-potent Stage 1 here in Expanded. And each player going to get 6. Let's see what Chris can do here.
Yeah, no, I bet one thing that Alfredo's really been hoping for against the possibility of a Sky Return play is to just have that 1 copy of Team Skull Grunt in his hand at the right time. That 1 copy lets you look at your opponent's hand and discard up to 2 energy that you find there. But it's a little bit harder to do when you only run the single copy and no way to get it other than, let's see, I mean, I don't exactly see any copies of teammates here either, so it just has to pop up at the right time.
Ultra Ball throwing away, I believe it was 2 Zorua. Very, very interesting. Chris might start doing a Shaman loop.
I think I could see that. And the advantage of being able to do that is that regardless of what reasonable counter Alfredo plays, Christopher can bring up a Shaman for Shaman and keep on doing that over and over again with Sky Return. But the risk in doing that is that he isn't that actively moving his board state and his prizes along in the game.
Chris just thinning his hand down, using Skyfield to give him that potentially that extra bench spot, and was able to set up for 4. However, did not find a DCE, did not find a way to put any more pressure onto this Bumblebee at the moment. Battle Compressor coming down after that setup. Card number 1 is Propagation Execute.
And with that 2 retreat on the Bumblebee, Christopher isn't nearly as worried about a get lost popping up out of nowhere, although maybe out of paranoia or abundance of caution, he might propagate that execute back into his hand.
We see the 3 choices: Choice Band, Dumbbells, and Propagation Execute. 3 great cards, Propagation Execute, to use for the trades, and the other 2 are just dead in the matchup. So even though if those were told to get lost, I don't think Chris would miss them, not even a little bit.
No, sir. And so that execute coming down right on cue is fuel for the dowsing machine. Get more resources back for an Ultra Ball. Fun little combo without the execute. That would have been a heck of a lot of cards discarded, but because he had it, not that bad, and he actually really isn't losing that much to get a fully matured setup right now.
That Ultra Ball grabbing Zorark GX number 2, and it is coming into play, which means another trade is available for Chris. His hand is Guzma, Psychic Energy, and mystery card in the back, Skyfield.
And that's a Flowstone right there. I think so.
Just a
It
pass.
looked like a floatstone anyways. He's just holding off on doing anything right now. Can't really do a whole lot in terms of damaging, so I think the pass is really all you can do.
Taking a look here at Alfredo's hand, Metal Energy coming down. What is that card? That's Trainer's Mail. Stardust Jirachi, or Stardust Jirachi, Trick Shovel. Trick Shovel is grabbed by Alfredo.
And if he hits yet another energy, it's gravy.
This is kind of what I was talking about, John. I understand that Durant is a faster style mill deck, but fast mill is kind of an oxymoron sometimes. There's still a lot of work to be done to win this game, and we are just under 23 minutes. So
like getting Durant's into play.
Yeah, Durant's into play. Durant's in the active. Ooh,
Ooh.
Ditto. That's a good one. Trick Shovel. Send that Ditto Prism to the loss zone.
Yep, and other than energy and replenishing resources like VS Seekers, Super Rods, things like that, Prism Stars are a really good hit off of a Handiwork or a Trick Shovel.
Absolutely. Red card and Sycamore, I believe, was the other card to come off of that Rockets Handiwork with just one heads, but much better rate, conversion rate on those Handiworks than Game 1, where poor Alfredo Garcia was 0 for 4.
We got a couple discards.
Mill 2 and a DCE Rescue Stretcher.
That's
Chris,
just what we were talking about, of the top things you could hit, replenishing resources like that Rescue Stretcher, like Super Rod, and of course basic and special energy. Christopher doesn't run that many.
DCE found right there by Chris. Another trade. Definitely going to want to hold on to that Field Blower just in case Alfredo puts down a Life Dew. However, Chris finds a DCE and might be able to start a little Shaman loop.
Yeah, although the thing that I'm concerned about here is, going back to what I said earlier, is that might be a little too slow, and Alfredo may have Christopher just where he wants him, because eventually when that Bunnelby is gone, this lets out the floodgates for all of the Durants discarding 4 cards a turn, as opposed to just the 2 that Bunnelby's doing. So when you're a Durant player, if you can avoid your opponent drawing any prizes, you get them all the way down to save like 20 cards, that's already in a pretty great spot.
I agree. A card that I peeked into Alfredo's hand was, in fact, that Team Skullgrunt you were talking about. And since he knows that DCE is in hand.
Wait a second. Okay, so he has it in hand right now?
Yep, I believe he has it in hand. So this is a good turn to use it, I think.
This is the optimal turn. I think this is the absolute perfect opportunity. And the great thing is, Alfredo has informed knowledge about that, specifically because of that Shaman Loop play. So Skullgrunt goes down, and he's eyeing it, and it goes down, and he is going to hit that double. He's going to hit that psychic
energy. Good night. Alfredo goes, yeah, I'm going to take those 2.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Shaman looks nice, but yeah. Yeah, let's go for the energy.
Chris going, oh, jeez.
And I think that's 2/3 or more of Chris's energy right now. So
2 very fortunate mills with the Bunnelby to get DCEs, and then that key Team Skullgrunt might open the door. But if I'm Chris, I'm saying, okay, like, beat me. That's fine. Like, if we're going to sit here and do this game, I'm going to make you go through the whole deck. Chris electing to Colress.
For a bunch of cards, probably hoping to hit that energy, get something going at least. But when 2/3 of your energy are gone, and you don't have a whole lot of recovery left, that's a tough spot to be in, to say the least.
Floatstone off trade number 1. Skyfield Super Rod off trade number 2. And Chris's deck is looking mighty small. I'm not convinced I would have Colressed for 8 there and then double traded, especially if I'm trying to play into the long game.
Yeah, we see Alfredo eyeing a VS Seeker on that Handiwork. We might see a huge discard this turn. So we're going to get the 2 flips. We got, well, tails, so not quite as many. And we got a head, so we got 2 discards right there.
Ultra Ball,
top 2.
Guzma. And that deck is mighty thin.
Man.
Mighty thin.
And you know what? One thing I got to bring up is, despite the fact that Alfredo has not used Devour for more than, I think, 1 card throughout the whole match so far, he's in a great spot right now. He hasn't even used Devour once this game.
No, Bunnelby really using its dual attack ability, bought a trick shovel early, which we saw that come into play fairly quickly, and then just got into mill mode. And Chris's deck life is looking very weak right now. Trainer's Mail pulling 4 cards. Alfredo, not sure. Fails it. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think Chris's whole game right now is on life support with that pass last turn, where now Alfredo, there hasn't been a single prize draw on this whole game by Chris. So at this point, Alfredo's got to be on Cloud 9 thinking, okay, you know what? I'll just go ahead and keep up with what I'm doing. Discard more, discard more. And, yeah, it looks like deck, like you said earlier, getting mighty thin. He might go for a 1-1 play here, but digging for even more resources, also a really good option, being able to get those Durants into play.
If I'm in Alfredo's spot, anytime a mill player asks you how many cards you got left in deck, you know they're hungry for that finish line. If I'm Alfredo, I'm not worried about recovering resources. He's kind of got everything he needs, especially with that Mount Cornet that just came to hand in case he has any energy snags. And I'm just saying mill every time.
And time being so important right now, if Alfredo's able to close this game out now or as soon as possible, then oh, and we've got a 2 retreat for the Mew, and we're finally going to get a Devour for some cards this game.
Now Cornet coming down, buys back those energies. No love lost on retreating that Bunnelby, and we're going to Devour for 3. Chip off, excuse me.
Ooh.
He is using chip off. Keep 4 cards. 1, 2, 3. Give me that 4th one. 4. Send the rest to the bin. Oh my, that chip off looking real good. Draw for turn, and that is a field blower and just a pass. Alfredo in the driver's seat. I think it's time to announce Devour.
Yes, sir, and he's actually got an extra spot right there on his bench. He might be able to get a max Devour off, but even if that's not the case, if I'm in Alfredo's shoes, I'm like, you know what? I don't even care too much. I just want to go, yep, and there's the whole deck, and there's the second game. So with about a little bit more than 15 minutes left, these guys have maybe just enough time to squeak out a third game. What do you think?
So exactly what I was talking about. There was 33 minutes left when that game started, and that one was firmly in Alfredo's control. He actually had to get fortunate to have that go so perfectly in his direction, and now we're coming down the pike. There's probably going to be about 15 minutes left when they actually kick this thing off, and it's going to have to be pedal to the metal on Alfredo's side of the board to manage that time to make sure he has enough to close out the game like he just did in game 2.
For sure, and if anybody's going to be on the losing end of a +3 turn scenario, it will be Alfredo, because remember, guys, in +3 turns, the whole win condition for Alfredo is decking his opponent out. That doesn't factor in until the beginning of your opponent's turn. So if we get into these +3 turns, we could get into an awkward scenario, really awkward scenario, where we get the +3 turns. Alfredo could theoretically have the game won by his 3rd turn of the 3 turns, but because Christopher would be starting, that would just be 1 turn too late, and so he wouldn't get a win. So, yep, super long story short, Alfredo needs to get the pedal to the metal, needs to be going 80, 90 miles per hour, maybe needs to be breaking some speeding laws. Don't break speeding laws, folks, but actually get something going and going fast.
So, I mean, just to flash back to game 1, if time does become a factor in whether this game finishes or not, game 1, he came back with the L. You got to be able to see that it's a favorable matchup, and maybe pick your cards up 5 minutes earlier, 7 minutes earlier, when you know things have gone sideways, you're down 4 prizes, and you haven't really established anything. And that way, he's walking into game 3 now. He would have probably been walking into game 3 with 24 minutes rather than, we're under 15, and we're watching them still shuffle up right now, John.
Yeah, although, and ultimately I do agree with you, but looking at it from both sides, playing a little bit of devil's advocate here on that first game, when you are in that spot and you are constantly playing behind, you at least see the opening. Even if it's a small opening, if you can secure that game 1 win and go for it, it's not too unreasonable. And I feel like that was kind of what was going on in game 1. So did that maybe lose a minute or two? Yeah, sure, but it was a calculated risk. And so right now it is very tight, where we have about 14 minutes left total. So With I mean, that might hurt Alfredo, but I see his logic.
No, absolutely. I think it can be cut both ways,
Yeah.
right? I think it truly comes down to the player and to the individual and how they foresee their life cycle through any given tournament. So these players are set up. We're going to jump back down. Alfredo again, leading with the Durant, which is what he wants to see. Zorua for Chris. DCE now safely in hand for Chris. That's what he likes to see in a natural Bridget, which means didn't have to do any work for it. It's just in that opening game.
I love this body language right now for Alfredo because he's just ready to go. He's rubbing his hands together. He's like, you know what? I want to devour some deck cards right here. I want to go ahead and discard everything right now. Get it off the board as fast as possible. Let's just go ahead and keep going, get my 4 Durants in play, and just go devour, 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 devour.
Alfredo putting that Girafarig down. Chris has to kind of know that if those DCEs go and Alfredo gets a good get lost off, you know, he's losing supporter resources permanently because he has no way to buy back the DCE. So I don't think Chris is too concerned if anything goes to the discard because he wasn't going to be able to buy back his DCEs, but at least protecting some of his more important supporters like Guzma and things like that.
Oh, for sure. And not just for offensive purposes, but again, for those defensive plays, it's really helpful to have that copy of Guzma circulating outside of the discard pile and safe from get lost, because if we see a defensive play from Alfredo, Christopher would love to see the counter play, the response play he made last time around, which was to play the Guzma in immediate response to that Garbodor coming out. So having those options is so crucial, especially when you're coming down to the wire like this.
Nest Ball is going to come down and come into play. Alfredo has another one, and I think an N tucked away in there somewhere. So let's get these Durants on the board, and let's start announcing Devour.
And where is the 4th Durant? I think that's going to be so huge, is having that 4th one in place so that we can get Devours for 4 off right away. Because if we go into perpetuity, if we go into a longer period of time with more Devours for 3 versus 4, we're going to feel the pain if we are on Alfredo's side here, where you get 3, 6, 9, multiples of 3, not nearly as good and effective as multiples of 4, because we got to get those discards going if we're Durant players. Otherwise, it's going to be painful, and you will probably not make it beyond time.
Couldn't agree. You know, you look at the context of a lot of Pokemon cards, a lot of shuffling needs to be done, and that just converts to seconds off the clock. An N, both players are shuffling. Both players have to draw cards for it to resolve. Time off the clock. Now, he had to play it, obviously. I'm not saying that was an incorrect play by any means, but I'm just highlighting the fact that the nature of the Pokemon trading card game is a lot of shuffling, and the clock is important. Alfredo, you know, playing a trainer's mail, making a decision here, grabbing that Team Rocket's handiwork, having to shuffle again, seconds off the clock.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if Alfredo has his 4th Durant available or not, but being able to get that Team Rocket's handiwork may pay off in dividends later, because, you know, he could get lucky, hit 2 heads, get a crucial turn going on the next turn or 2, but a decent number of options, and that Life Dew too. That Life Dew is huge, because if Christopher is forced to charge into it, then that's one less prize that he can get.
Alfredo taking a look. Life Dew on the Durant. Devour for 3. Ultra Ball.
And the Super Rod.
Mr. Mime. And a draw for turn, and that is a Sycamore. Now, I'm interested to see where Chris goes here. He does have his Orctrex. He does have a DCE. I feel like you want to chase your Field Blower in this scenario.
Yes. Or some way around the Life Dew, at least. Just some way to draw prizes. Because, you know, with all the excitement about Durant being able to potentially race its way to a win, remember, guys, that the exact same thing is going on Christopher's side. And he wins in a traditional way. He wins games in a traditional way by drawing all 6 prizes. Or, as the case may be, just knocking out 4 Pokemon if he's so lucky.
Something to consider here, just a second trade. 2 Zoroark GXs come down. 3rd Zoroark GX. And Chris going to take a look. Go ahead and trade. Field Blower, there it was.
Yep.
So I'm glad he caught it, because that brings me to my next point. Chris only plays 6 energy in deck.
Yes.
And he has to take 6 prizes.
So,
and they're all single prizers. So attacking into a Life Dew and losing an energy puts him into an uneven ability to take all his prizes simply because of the text of Life Dew.
Yep,
so finding the Field Blower was huge.
The name of the game with Chris on his side is just a prize a turn, a prize an energy. And if you're doing those things, you're moving at the pace that you need to.
Quick rescue stretcher gonna buy back a Durant, and that seems like a pretty rough Professor Juniper.
6.
A lot of full arts going away, including that Team Rocket's handiwork that Alfredo picked up last turn. Mew FCO gonna hit the bench and does a very good Durant impression when it's in that active, being able to devour or chip off.
Can't impersonate a whole lot right now on the bench, but we get that level ball, and I like the sequencing here, the order of operations that Alfredo's following. He gets that Pokemon, that search off right now before he plays Trainer's Mail, because he did not hit an energy off of that Juniper for 7. So he needs to get some sort of energy out off of that Trainer's Mail like Mount Coronet.
I feel like we've been saying that quite a bit.
Yeah,
for Alfredo. I wouldn't have mind maybe a copy of Skyla in this deck. Helps you get access to maybe your Mount Coronet, your life dues, your things like that. Cards that you can use immediately.
Oh, and nothing too instantaneous right now. Just that one copy of Flare Grunt off the Trainer's Mail. So that'll factor in at some point, I'm assuming that Alfredo doesn't have a better card to play in a given point. So it's there, it's waiting in the wings, but it's not that energy we needed in order to be able to get those Devour for 3.
Now, Chris has to feel that Alfredo missed the energy because it hasn't come down yet. Heads on Crushing Hammer.
Yeah, so it bounces out a little bit.
It evens it out. As we mentioned, it's got to be a 1-for-1. Chris attaching a DCE here and hitting Alfredo with a red card, I think would be very good.
Yes, sir. By being able to get that disruption going, he can get a little bit further ahead and maybe close this game out, showing everybody, yeah, you know what, even in an unfavorable matchup or unfavorable board position, Zoroark has its ways around just about anything.
Chris, Skyfield, Trubbish, Tapu Lele GX, using the Wonder Tag ability, searching his deck for any supporter card, chooses Colress, and that's going to be a Colress for 3, 6, 10. If he elects to play it.
And I noticed something a little funny about Alfredo's side where he very briefly flashed his Skull Grunt a bit. I feel like he is noticing how big Christopher's hand is about to get. He's just hoping to hit a couple energy off of his Skull Grunt. So even if he doesn't have an energy, he could follow the energy denial route if he can't mill this upcoming turn.
So yeah, the mill strategy obviously at its best when combined with an energy denial strategy as well. Chris fortunate enough to just hit 1 energy in those 10 cards, so if Skull Grunt comes down, Alfredo won't get paid off quite yet.
Yeah, it would be an absolute waste as a matter of fact. So sticking to the original game plan, being able to get out Durant and more importantly get out energy because he already has 3 out of 4 Durant is going to be big.
Quick knockout by Chris. Mew FCO comes up. Free retreat in case Alfredo's flavor off of Devour changes. However, still missing that energy. And that is the next piece of the puzzle for Alfredo to keep his strategy moving and give himself a chance here with 5 minutes and 42 seconds left in Game 3.
And with that counter catcher top deck, he has a few more options. Still stuck with no energy. Being able to discard that double colorless energy is so huge, but it's not quite enough yet. So I wonder, A, if Alfredo is going to play the counter catcher. I think he's flirting with it. But B, if he does do that, what is he going to bring up? Because it would need to be something that is going to be a little bit harder to score a knockout, or at least require Chris to use some of his resources to get out of the active position.
Alfredo really taking a look, sees that there's a lot of float stones that have been put down, hasn't seen Guzma too much this game, elects to counter catcher up a Trubbish, and I think that's the right choice.
Yep, and we talked about this before. Garbage collection is not moving at the tempo and pace to keep up with Durant quite as well. So but of course we were talking about this earlier, those defensive plays coming on from Alfredo, and Christopher immediately has his own recovery play as a response. The defensive play being that counter catcher, bring up a big fat target like Trubbish, and the response play, Guzma, to not only bring up a better Pokemon to knock out, but to get your vulnerable Trubbish out of the active position.
Chris using Wonder Tag to get Guzma, uses Propagation Egg to trade twice, now 3 times. Garbodor with the Garbotoxin ability can come down, but we're going to go Guzma on Stardust. Jirachi DCE to the Floatstone Zorark versus Seeker for Guzma. Not going to fall victim to that gambit again, Alfredo.
Not at
I am
all.
prepped with a Guzma.
And if I'm not mistaken, is that only 2 cards in Alfredo's hand entirely, just the Skull Grunt and the Lysander?
I believe so.
Yeah, so, I mean, we had a great game, too, and it looked like it was an okay start for the second game, but no draw power, not enough momentum to keep the game moving unless Alfredo gets a good top deck. We can't exclude the possibility of that.
Well, he had that rough Juniper where he discarded 2 other Juniper, or at least another copy of Juniper. And when you're getting rid of your draw supporters at that rate, with such a large deck still left, there's a good opportunity that you fall flat. And unfortunately for Alfredo, that's kind of what he's facing here. And you're going to have to knock the top of the deck to keep his hopes alive here. And to Cynthia right there
right
off
on
the top.
cue, man.
Right on off the top. So Alfredo gets to keep playing. Chris sees that, can't be too jazzed about it. He thought he had Alfredo against the ropes, and Alfredo says, not today, sir. Give me 6, see what we can do with this.
And I think both of these players are not too thrilled about the possibility of a tie. There's some situations where you can either be resigned to the fact that you will get a tie. There's some situations where, based off the matchup, you would totally be fine taking a tie. But no, I can see it in the way both of them are playing. They're both really wanting to dig for that win here, not giving up on it. Christopher, even though he's got a slightly unfavorable matchup in some ways, he sees an out of just being able to knock out 3 Pokemon. And Alfredo sees his out in the energy denial and rapid discard of Devour.
Trick Shovel, Propagate Egg going to the discard. Alfredo finds the Metal Energy, finds a Crushing Hammer. This Crushing Hammer needs to hit heads for him to be able to cross this finish line.
And he
it's
did.
Heads. It's heads. Okay, so Alfredo getting what he needs. Fortunate top deck. Great cards off the 6. Hits heads with Crushing Hammer. Metal Energy. Alfredo
he sees 3 double in the discard, counting the deck just like you said.
Here's the thing. If I'm Alfredo, I haven't seen a Special Charge or an Oranguru in 2 games.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I'm not saying get lost. I'm saying devour. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Now, I mean, like, there's no question about it. And it seems like even though both players are playing to win here, it seems like there's a little bit of a change in the tempo where I don't quite feel the exact same urgency on Alfredo's side as he had at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, he seems
what I mean?
Very jazzed up at the beginning of the game. That intensity really needed to be carried through. Something that some folks have historically called turbo Tord, referring to Tord Reklev, where his first couple games seem to be a bit more meticulous, but when it's crunch time, you can't even see his hands are moving so fast. Can't even see him. They're a blur. Battle Compressor gonna thin out the deck, Chris.
Oh, and that's I don't know how. I don't know if I'm characterizing it as dangerous or not. But we've seen this happen before where a good handiwork at the right time changes everything. And Alfredo's sitting on draw power right now, so it's not out of the question. Although if I'm Christopher, I want my deck to have enough cards in it such that I have options. I'm not too vulnerable to a discard, but I also want to end before the +3 on my turn so that Alfredo doesn't get effectively more than 1 turn. Because this was just what we were talking about. Alfredo needs more than he either needs to win on the turn 1 or that's just it. You see what I'm saying? Where he can't quote unquote win the game on the 3rd turn of +3 because that wouldn't be enough for a win.
Chris was trading to energy, found the energy. Now, I don't believe he's played a supporter this turn. If he had a Versus Seeker, I'd love to see him play an N. He found the energy he needs to take a knockout. He's got a Rescue Stretcher. He can buy back some Pokemon. Throw those in there, play an N, get your hand to 3, your deck as full as possible, and put the onus on Alfredo to have either a Crushing Hammer and a Skull Grunt and a way to devour next turn.
Yep, and right on cue, Christopher set it up to the point where he has a thick enough deck of cards such that it will be a little bit harder to pull off a deck out win. But see, that's the thing. It looked like he had a count of. I didn't get the exact count. Did you?
There's 4 cards left. Chris going through, and he just looked through his discard with Rescue Stretcher. Oh, but they've hit time. They've hit time.
They have hit time.
But
But yeah, although the thing here is that. So Christopher, we know for a fact there is absolutely no way that Christopher can pull off this match win, but there is a decent chance that Alfredo could pull off the deck out win in time. But it gets even more complex because Alfredo has to do it on his first turn. He cannot do it on the third turn or else it will end up in a draw.
Yeah, so Chris is making his deck as big as humanly possible. Dowsing Machine using the 2 prop eggs to get Super Rod to Super Rod in 2 more Pokemon after just Rescue Stretchering 3 more Pokemon. And the last piece of this puzzle for Chris is an N. Or some way to shuffle his hand in.
Let's see. And so we have that.
Super Rod has to grab 3 Pokemon, so he threw in the other egg as the third.
Oh,
and then he propagated the other egg.
Did I just see a Colress there?
Was it a Colress? So his hand had to be larger than 3, 6, 7, 12. His hand was larger than 12.
You know what? Yeah, you know what? I think that was a Colress.
2 Versus Seekers right on
get,
top. So if there's an N tucked away in there somewhere, we've got a chance for Chris to get out of here with a draw knockout. Here, this is exactly what I was talking about, John, is Alfredo is in such a commanding spot in this game right now, assuming a way to get this energy off. Even after that, I still think he's in a fairly comfortable spot.
But it's just not enough, and it's not enough in the +3.
It's not enough in a +3, but you throw 5 minutes onto that clock. How you feeling about it? I'd be feeling a heck of a lot better.
Yeah, I would say so. I would definitely be feeling a little bit better about that, and that's where being able to survive through what you've called before the jungle of the first few rounds, go on, get past some of the meta, and make it to the top 8. A +15 would have been so helpful for Durant in this spot, but as it stands, I mean, we're Cynthiaing, we're getting some solid discards, but I don't think we're discarding so many cards that will be enough to end it for Alfredo. But you know what? He can't feel too bad because Christopher's effectively a prize off from being able to win, thanks to time.
That is 6 cards off the Cynthia. We knew Alfredo had the Metal Energy and the Crushing Hammer off the Trainer's Mail. We're really just shaping up to exactly what this Durant deck wants to be doing. We are in turn 1 of time. Mount Cornet coming down can buy back some Metal Energy. Alfredo going through the paces. We mentioned before, if you're on camera, have fun with it.
Yeah.
You know, enjoy your time. A lot of people were clamoring from this Durant deck. Give the fans what they want. Keep playing it through.
And this is an exciting way for it to end. It's a little awkward in some ways based off of the +3 and the interaction with the way these 2 decks win, where both players are just a little bit short of being able to do what they need, but it's still been a really good match.
Counter catcher pulling up the Tapu Lele. Trick shovel throwing away a Zorua. I love it. Alfredo saying, well, I'm here. Might as well keep at it. Is that a level ball?
I think so, yeah.
Level ball coming down for Alfredo. Going to get another shot at just peeking through the deck. Bunnelby, Rototiller, Burrow with that ancient trait. Going to be picked up. And as I mentioned, I think Chris has the Versus Seeker. I would be shocked if he's not eyeing down the N that I believe he has in his discard as well. And he might just Versus Seeker N on his turn and say, all right, Alfredo, mill 20, or you know, whatever the number is.
I'm curious, just out of curiosity, how close Alfredo gets off this mill for 3 and how many cards away he was. 1,
2, 3. Versus Seeker,
yeah,
Field Blower, Guzma.
Just a little bit
and the
off.
way Chris flipped that, which was so different than every other time he's done it. 3, 4, 5
yeah, he
cards
was
left.
Not far at all, or not close at all.
But Versus Seeker N, and you've gone ahead and locked this thing up.
Lights out for both of these players right now. No way around it. Just a little bit short on Chris's side from being able to secure a win in Game 3.
I mean, Chris needs to do something. Well, I guess because, as you mentioned, turn 2, going into turn 3, even if Alfredo milled every single card, that turn 4 doesn't exist for the resolution of that game-winning condition.
Precisely.
And it would still end in a draw.
Yep, and I think they just kind of worked it out one way or the other. great match.
The
either
end
way.
was in the prizes. I guess
no.
I was thinking about that game 2 when he played an N. So
Yeah.
using the Colors to effectively do a much bigger version of what I was discussing to shuffle a bunch of cards back in
But
your
at least
deck.
keep your deck circulating, right? So you don't run the risk of decking out, even if it's for a lot of cards. And I felt like that was a good approach, you know? He was walking the line between not running the risk of giving away a free win, but also advancing his game state. Just one turn off, effectively.
Yep. Anecdotal story here for Alfredo, maybe a lessons learned. I have to keep harping on it. That game 1 went 13, 14, 15 minutes. And when you're handed such a favorable matchup, in my mind, if the game 1 goes so off the rails, I really just want to get to game 2 and game 3 and hope that my game plan, which has been working for me all day, shows up again and gives me the opportunity to get a solid, no clock involved type win. Both of these players still sitting in great positions at 402 here in Hartford. Certainly not dead, but still a little bit of work ahead of them.
Yep. I mean, in order to be able to advance into day 2, they need at least 19 match points because they have 4 wins. That's 12 points, 3 wins for each win, and 2 ties, so 1 point for each tie. So 14 total, not bad, but awkward enough to the point where they still have to get at least a win and a tie each in order to be able to have something going on. And even then, that's not safe because 18 points isn't guaranteed to make day 2. So they got a little bit of work ahead of them, but they aren't too far.
Yep, it goes, obviously, day 2 goes whomever has 19 points or the top 32.
Yeah, whatever's bigger.
Whichever's bigger. So round 6 here in the books. Durant, Zorark, Garbador, you're taking a break. I'll be back with Jeffrey Saran Wrap Saran. They called time, and this round has gone on, so no interview this time around. But hopefully we'll get to catch either Alfredo or Chris on a win in a different round, maybe in day 2. So stay tuned with us. We'll be back with round 7 action here shortly.
You wanted it, you got it, and we've got the man right here. The people beat down the doors to get an interview for this tie, this last match. Such a great match between Alfredo and his opponent, Chris, and I am here with one of the drawing players from round 6, Alfredo Garcia. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
Doing great. So tell me a little bit about what you decided in terms of like choosing a deck for this tournament. So were you always on Durant for this expanded tournament, or did you get to that point after a while?
So I actually played Durant at North Carolina Regionals. I finished there 5-3-1. So since it did really well there, I figured, why not play it again? It's not a bad deck, even in this format with all these new cards and everything. And with all these new cards, it makes it even more easier to play Durant, in my opinion anyways. So I was talking to one of my buddies because I'm originally from California, and I
Mhm.
moved all the way out here to Connecticut. And I was talking to my buddy in California, and we were describing, talking about the meta, and what's good, what's not. And we talked about Durant, and since all these decks and expanded, they seem to burn through their decks really quickly. I figured, why not? Let's play Durant. Really the only bad matchup that I have is Trevenant, and luckily today in this regionals I've been able to avoid it. My matchups, round 1 was Rayquaza GX Ho-Oh EX, the rebirth ability. Then I played 3 Pika ROMs in a row. And then round 5 was the tie with the Shock Lock that everyone wanted to see. That it was a really fun match, Really,
How'd it go, by the way?
So it was just one game, the whole 50 minutes.
Oh,
And
man.
it was mainly me like drawing, passing. He's just like Evo Shock, returned, everything. And I was trying to get my trick shovels, but I was down to like 10 cards in the deck, and I just could not find any of my trick shovels to win.
So would you have been able to pull off the deck out win if you hit one of the trick shovels?
Not one of them. I needed more than one to get the win. But my opponent that game was very cautious in that matchup because he already knew that I was playing Durant.
Yeah.
Before going in. I had no idea what he was playing until someone next to him was like, "Oh, this is gonna be a great match between Shocklock and Durant. I wonder how this is gonna go." So I was pretty excited for it because again I knew nothing of Shocklock until I saw it.
So did you make any changes between North Carolina and here?
Yes, I did. I actually made 2 changes to my deck, like
What's
just two cards. So at North Carolina, I forgot to throw in Field Blower, which could have possibly made me get day 2 over there. So I definitely threw that one in. And then last night was just a last-minute decision. I cut out 1 Enhanced Hammer and threw in an extra counter catcher.
Cool.
And that's been coming in clutch for me in these games.
It gives you some of those defensive plays to be able to move stuff around and get something with high retreat cost into play.
Right, and everyone pretty much saw like all my text. They saw my Girafarig, they saw the Jirachi, they saw Bunnelby. So I without the extra enhance, I figured I could just use Jirachi for all the special energies, like I was trying to do in my matchup. But again, my opponent was just really smart about it and knew to knock it out first. But I was kind of baiting that at the same time.
So at this point, you're just feeling mostly like dodge Trev, dodge bad hands, and you're in a good position?
Pretty much, yeah.
Nice.
Like as long as I can dodge Trev. Like Trev is probably a 95% loss for me unless I get a good mill against it. So, but yeah, as long as I don't get bad hands like I did in game 1 of this that everyone saw, I'm pretty okay.
Nice. Well, hey, 3 rounds left in the tournament, but best of luck, and might see a little bit more of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Again, thank you for having me on here. I'm glad to talk to everyone on here, and I was actually surprised that you all wanted to watch Durant, so I'm kind of glad for that too.
Yeah.
Oldie but goodie.